Hi guys, welcome back to Authentic Talks 2.0. My name is Shanta Generally and I am your host. Today's episode is for the serious entrepreneur, for someone who has big dreams and big ideas and who wants to pitch investors and want to get it right. Being able to understand how to use someone else's money to fund your big idea is so important. But before we dive in with today's episode, we got some housekeeping things that we want to go ahead and take care of. If you're not subscribed to the show, go ahead and take a moment and hit that subscribe button. That way you will not miss an episode once I upload a show. And please be sure to share this episode with family members and friends and take the time to leave a review. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much in advance for taking that time to rate the show. This helps the show to continue to expand. All right, you guys. Now, for those of you who may know someone who's an entrepreneur, or you may be an entrepreneur yourself, when you have those big dreams and big goals, but you might be struggling on how to present it to an investor, we need that insight tip. And it's so important for us to understand what it is we need to do in order for us to leverage and to get ahead, right? So I'm joined today by Ben, who's a venture capitalist, author, a startup mentor, and the mind behind the sharp and insightful new book, Fever Pitch. Ben takes us inside the high stakes world of startup pitching, sharing what works, what flops, and how to land a life-changing yes from investors. We all want to hear that yes when we're ready to pitch our pitch. In our conversation, Ben reveals the H.E.A.R.T of a perfect pitch, what every founder must know to earn trust, win funding, and survive the journey from idea to execution. So whether you're an entrepreneur, a creative, or just someone navigating high-pressure moments, Ben's wisdom will resonate deeply. Let's dive on in to this awesome conversation. Please welcome Ben Wiener to Authentic Talks. Authentic Talks is all about authentic conversations. This show is all about growth, love, respect, success, mind, body, and spirit. If you're looking to grow and become your authentic self, then this is the podcast for you. And I am your host, Shanta. Welcome to the show. Hi, Ben. Welcome to Authentic Talks with Shanta. I hope that all is well with you. I'm going to go ahead and dive on in. Welcome to the show. And can we start with your story about what inspired you to write Fever Pitch as a business fable instead of a traditional how-to book?
First of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I like to teach through storytelling. And I guess just background on the book, on my day job, I'm a venture capital investor, so I invest in startup companies. Before that, I was an entrepreneur for many years. So I've had experience both as an entrepreneur pitching investors for money in my companies, and now as an investor investing in other people's companies. I'm involved in hearing pitches and making pitches a lot, like presenting a new innovative business idea. And as common as that experience is, unfortunately, it often falls flat. I thought originally that maybe it was just me getting bad pitches or meeting entrepreneurs that weren't polished. But a couple of years ago, we did a survey of investors around the world, and over 82% said that on average, the pitches they receive from entrepreneurs are not well organized. Regardless of the quality of the venture, the organization of the presentation is not right. And that creates a friction or a ringing in the ears when listening to these proposals. It's just very frustrating for both sides. The entrepreneur who needs to raise that money or needs to get their business to move forward is frustrated when it doesn't work. And the people hearing the pitches are also frustrated when they fall flat. I started to do some research on was there such a thing as an optimal presentation format and structure? And that led me to discover or uncover what I believed was a 5-part framework for the optimal pitch. Once I had that in hand, I thought, okay, one way I could teach it would be to write a 2,000-word LinkedIn post, which would just kind of wash away with all the other self-help and how-to guides out there. But what if I think it struck me when I was saying to somebody, there's certain founders who can't pitch their startup to save their lives. What if there was a startup founder who actually needed to pitch his startup to save his life? And the story started to come into my head of a fictional entrepreneur who's kind of well-meaning, well-educated, a good guy, but he is just not getting his company's story straight and gets involved in this hilarious or rocky roller coaster of a life where because he can't raise money for his startup, his family life starts to fall apart and he gets mixed up with the New Jersey mafia and they're chasing him. It's an extreme case of a pitch gone wrong. Through the course of the story, we encounter what's wrong with his presentation and his view of how he should be running his business. The situation throws him into this total chaos and mayhem where it forces him to learn what he needs to do correctly, but there's still some tension because he may be running out of time.
Before
Yeah.
we dive in further, normally when I open up the show, I always ask the guests to introduce themselves to our listeners. Today, I started with a question with you, and I'm going to back up a little bit and ask if you can introduce yourselves to our listeners at this time. Can you introduce us to Mark, the founder in your book? And can you share with us how much of his journey is fiction and how much reflects what you've seen in a real startup pitch?
Yes, that's a great question. I think every author who writes a story has some biographical or autobiographical stuff in there. I mean, I was never chased by the mafia. My wife didn't leave me with the kids, but it's an extreme version of some of the smaller things that do happen to almost any entrepreneur when they're trying to do something new. So I kind of turned it up many notches. The core misconceptions or problems that he faces in the book are problems that we all face when we're trying to do something new. I did not go through the specific things that my character goes through in the book,
Okay,
but
that's good.
thankfully, a lot of them had their roots in things that I did experience or saw other people go through. There's really only one or two characters in the book who have any kind of relationship to somebody real in my life, but it's not me. I purposely didn't want anybody to think that I was writing about them if they would read the book, anybody that I knew. So I conjured up these characters and made them extreme, funny, wacky. But at its core, what Mark is going through are very real problems that entrepreneurs face all the time. Am I telling my story straight? Am I communicating properly with my partners? Am I communicating properly with my loved ones and my family? Do they understand what I'm going through? Am I explaining to them what my actual plans are? Am I being honest with them about how realistic my plans are, or am I just dreaming and hoping for the best? A lot of those are very real for all of us who have tried something new. He just ends up in crazier circumstances, which are
Yeah.
not autobiographical, but the core inability to get the story straight. I've definitely experienced that in my professional life, where at the beginning I just wasn't explaining it properly and then had to learn how to represent it properly. I think a lot of us have gone through that. And that's part of why I wrote the book, to help
Help
founders or
people.
entrepreneurs. If you follow this playbook, it's going to be easier for you. You're not guaranteed to succeed, but it's going to be an easier process in presenting your information to somebody and get them to take action because of it.
On the setup, on the startup struggle and pitching, you describe Mark as someone who can't pitch to save his life. Why do you think pitching is so hard for so many startup founders, even those with great ideas? Because I know that, like, I've talked to some people who have some pretty amazing ideas, but then when they're talking in front of certain people to sell it doesn't sound like it came out the same way that they described it to me in private.
I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a startup founder is somebody who is, by definition, a very unusual person. They're incredibly creative. They're trying to do something new in the world. And they've gone through a lot of processes in their heads to get themselves to take this action. They're very convinced that they're onto something amazing. And that's great. The problem is they sometimes forget that the people they're talking to are not there yet and aren't aware of what they're aware of because they haven't spent nearly as much time thinking about it. And in fact, the really innovative ideas, like the great innovative ideas in history, were always non-consensus. The greater the idea, the more likely it is that it's so brand new that most people are not going to get it and actually are going to get upset when you tell them about it. When Brian
Mhm.
Chesky started Airbnb in 2008 or 2009 and said, I'm going to create a company where people are going to sleep in other people's bedrooms, that was insane. And a lot of people told him he was crazy. But it was such a breakthrough idea that when it did take off, he was able to build a huge company with his co-founders. Uber, the ride sharing, Netflix, the founding CEO of Netflix wrote a book called That Will Never Work. That's what people were telling them when they started Netflix. So the greatest ideas are often very non-consensus and make people shake their heads and say, that's ridiculous, that'll never work. So
You
if
did mention one that Uber, the car share ride where people are using their own vehicles. I remember when taxi cab drivers were around and when they started shifting to that, I was a person who was like, that's dangerous. You're getting in someone else's car and they're supposed to take you to the airport. And then someone else said, you're doing the same thing when you're getting in a taxi. People
right,
were doing that back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, early 80s, even in the 90s. And those were strangers. They just had the word taxi on the car. So I love that you mentioned that because it takes me back to like, yeah, somebody actually had to pitch that and come up with that idea. So I love that you're sharing these, like the Airbnb, the Netflix thing. Wasn't Amazon also like that or no?
yeah, I think every great company, most people that heard it shook their heads and said, that's crazy. You could find an old interview with Jeff Bezos. Amazon, I think in 1995, 96 or 97, his first interview with Charlie Rose, which is still on the internet. Charlie Rose, the famous journalist, is asking him, is this really a thing? Do you think this can really be big? Like you already have 8 million users. How many more do you think you're going to get? So even very smart people thought that Amazon was kind of maxed out at 8 million customers. And now, you know,
Yeah.
it's staggering. I think a lot of the innovative things are clear to the founder and equally unclear to the people listening to them. It's very hard to break out of your body and brain and put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's incredibly skeptical and doesn't believe what you believe, and then get them to believe what you believe. By definition, an entrepreneur is so convinced that what they have is amazing that it's hard for them to forget that the person they're talking to is not up to where they are, and then get out of your body, get out of your head, and reframe the conversation in a way that builds it up properly for the person who's listening to it for the first time, who may not be nearly as convinced as you are because you've done more work and you're further ahead, deeper into the future. They're still in the past or in the present. You have to get yourself almost in a time traveler situation and get back to the present and say, okay, I know you don't realize this yet, but I have this vision of the future and let me explain it to you step by step to show you how it could work. So that's a skill and it's hard for most people to do naturally. What I've tried to do in this framework is give you a 5 part structure for how to reframe that new idea step by step, quickly. It can be done in a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Just set it up logically and walk the person who's listening through the logical steps of why you think this is a thing, what's at stake, what the alternatives are, what your heroic newfangled solution is, and why you and your team are the right people to do it. That's the H.E.A.R.T 5 part heart of the perfect pitch that I developed. The fun was to embed that into this wacky 270-page novel of a founder who's not able to figure that out in the beginning and forced to figure out that stuff while life unravels around him.
I love that share. You mentioned heart framework. Can you break it down? What is the HEART?
Sure,
Oh,
that's what it's all
okay.
about. So and it has to be in order. So if you have an innovative idea, you want to create AI for making a new kind of dog food. Most people make a mistake of starting off with what the company does or what their idea is. There are 3 steps before that. So H is hypothesis, start with why. That's based on the famous Simon Sinek TED Talk, the famous book, Start with Why. When somebody asks you what you do, don't answer what you do, answer first why, what you believe. The first sentence should be, I believe that. Something about your market. I believe that there's a huge problem, or I believe that there's this great opportunity. Often the person you're talking to doesn't believe that yet, but that's okay. You're challenging them to say, okay, I'm framing this. I believe something about the future. Please just hear me out. That's H. H, hypothesis, start with why. E is enormous stakes. There's a lot at stake. That's why I want to dedicate the next couple of years of my life to
E
doing
is
this.
what was the E? Enormous?
Enormous stakes. There's a lot at stake.
Oh, enormous stakes. I like that.
I needed to work it into an acronym that you'd remember. So H, hypothesis, start with why. Then E, enormous stakes. What's at stake? Why should I care about this problem or opportunity? There's a lot of human life at stake, or there's a lot of money at stake, or there's just a big market opportunity now or in the future for this new idea. A is the alternatives are terrible, or what I call alternatives grossly inadequate. There's a huge problem or opportunity. The stakes are really high, but the current state of play is terrible. Like there's no good solution for this set of problem or opportunity. The current activity is bad. The competition is terrible. The current available solutions are either non-existent or subpar. Something needs to be fixed. And then the R is the radical, differentiated, game-changing solution that me and my co-founders have invented to solve that problem with a lot at stake with terrible alternatives. And that's the HEAR. So hypothesis start with Y, E enormous stakes, A alternatives are terrible, radical, revolutionary, differentiated, game-changing solution. And then finally the T is us, the team, and the traits and skills of the team. We are the right people. I'm the right person to do this. We are the right team to do this because we have the credibility and the ability in this specific space to build this thing we're going to launch into the world and save the day. The HEART really just tracks the way what I'm claiming is this is just the way we tell stories all the time. We're cavemen around the campfire or cave women. The best of us were able to get the other cave people to chase the woolly mammoth or run away from the saber-toothed tiger. The best ones of us were able to do that by building stories, and our brains evolved to digest these stories in a certain way. So the ones who could tell their stories with an HEART framework. Hey, I believe that the woolly mammoths are over on that side of the hill, and if we get them, we can have meat for the next 6 months. The alternatives are we're going to die and starve in this cave, and I've got this radical new spear that can kill the I don't know, and I'm the right guy because I spent the last 6 months sharpening it. I just convinced everybody to run after me and chase this new opportunity. That's the way we told stories. We just don't always do that in business. We don't always do that in politics. We don't always do that in our professional lives. But if you and I were talking about our summer vacation or something else that we did socially, that's probably the way we would construct our stories. So I'm just saying, let's port the structure that we use for regular storytelling and let's move that into a business context. And it's going to be better for the person making the
Reading
pitch.
it.
It's going to feel more powerful for them. They're going to feel in control. And more importantly, it's going to resonate better with the person they're trying to get to take action, to give them money, to buy the product, whatever it is. We're just layering it on top of a regular storytelling structure. And I've given them a 5-part acronym to make it easier for them to remember.
I love it. I think it is going to be easy for people to remember that heart and what each letter represents. I like how you put that together. Ben, you're putting money behind people whenever they're pitching their stories to you.
I mean, I pick a couple a year. I hear hundreds of pitches from entrepreneurs, and I only have enough money in my fund to invest in a few, so I have to be incredibly picky. I'm looking for those 5 things. When I'm listening to founders pitching me, I'm trying to retranslate it into a framework that my brain can react to. I'm doing that simultaneous translation, like in the United Nations, when one country is talking to another, and there's somebody in between translating. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think all investors are trying to do that when entrepreneurs are pitching them. I'm just trying to make it easier by giving them a framework that's going to be easier for the investors to digest. But yes,
Ev-
this is what I'm going through every single day.
Every day? Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So every single day. Oh, I thought it would be like spread out, like where you're having to hear those pitches like maybe I don't know why for some reason I was thinking it would be like maybe once a month, but I get it. That makes sense. If you have hundreds or thousands you're trying to start something up, of course they want to get in front of you. And I'm sure they're nervous.
It's
Yeah.
very nerve-wracking, and I have a lot of empathy. There's a lot at stake, a lot riding on that meeting going well. I feel for them. I've been in that position myself. I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
I have to raise money for my fund. I'm not investing my money. I'm investing money from wealthy individuals, foundations, and companies that have given me their capital to invest in these startups. So every once in a while, I need to be in that position where I'm pitching people to put money into my fund. I know what it feels like when you're sitting across from a billionaire and you're making this impassioned plea for them to give you money into your fund. It's the exact same situation. I know what's at stake. I know what it feels like. I have empathy for them. And the same way that I've trained myself to make my presentations using this framework, it just makes me feel more comfortable. I'm trying to give it to them when they're pitching me or somebody else like me to make them feel more empowered, more in control, and more likely to at least make it make sense to somebody who's trying to sort through all this stuff.
What are some real life examples that you might be able to share? I'm not sure if you can or not, that you've witnessed where a great pitch turned things around, or where a weak one may have sunk, like a promising company.
I'll give you two. I'll give you a
Okay.
negative and I'll be humble. Like the negative is me and the positive is somebody who pitched me. So in my early days of doing this job, like I said, I needed to pitch investors to give me money. And early on, I would say about a year or two in, I made a presentation to a group and a gentleman came up to me afterwards. This only happened to me twice in my life. It's really shocking. Stranger comes up to me and says, "Ben, I heard your pitch. I think you're full of Schlitz and not the beer. Like he actually like cursed me out.
Wow.
And it's just so shocking when somebody does that. First of all, what about what I had said caused him to react so strongly?
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, you can totally panic and get incredibly insulted or just incredibly depressed. Like, wow, this went about as badly as it possibly could have gone. Well, fast forward a couple years later, that person is one of my most valued investors. He ended up investing in my fund. He ended up becoming, a very important person in my life. So I was able to transform literally like a profane reaction to my pitch to not only a positive outcome, but a very close relationship. And I think my pitch wasn't exactly right, what I was presenting. I needed to fix that and translate his negative reaction to saying to myself, okay, I know that I'm on the right track. I really believe in what I'm doing, but clearly I'm not presenting this clearly enough to these people if they're reacting so strongly. So that was a lesson learned where I needed to go back to the drawing board and retool my presentation to make it make more sense and be more clear to investors. That was a negative case.
Mm-hmm.
Positive one I ever heard. I mean, I hear pitches hundreds a year. The coolest one I ever heard was a local program in our community where, like you said, usually they're spread out, but once in a while you go to a program like an accelerator or an incubator where there's a whole bunch of founders and they're all up on stage and they're pitching one after the other. I was a judge at one of these programs, and the program had given each founder literally 1 minute, like 60 seconds on a clock to pitch their startups.
Talk about
55
pressure.
it was 55 individuals getting up on stage with a gong, somebody on the clock, and they would go, okay, go. The clock is winding down, and they're breathlessly telling you everything about their new thing. And then this one young woman stands up with a British accent. She's a neuroscientist. She bangs out a perfect 59-second description, almost exactly like the H.E.A.R.T that I just, without ever, I had not written my book yet. It was as if she intuitively understood how to do it. And the clock hits zero and she finishes, takes a breath. And it was just the most remarkable pitch that I've ever heard. I remember running over to her afterwards and saying, I didn't fully understand everything that you were saying because it was neuroscience and technical, but clearly she was in complete control of her story. I said to her, we need to meet one on one in a more professional, scheduled meeting so I can understand more clearly what you're doing. I ended up becoming the first investor in her company. And it's an absolutely transformative company that can save many lives and hundreds of millions or billions of dollars from the healthcare system bloat. And it all came from a 59.9-second presentation that she completely nailed. It's incredibly unfair to make people do something like that. But if you're able to pass through that fire and do it correctly, it's just incredibly amazing, an incredibly talented person who's able to do that. She had that natural gift, but it can be learned. I try to give this tool to people and challenge them and say, okay, just read this out. Here's the output of the H.E.A.R.T. Just stand up and read it in 60 seconds, and it sounds pretty good. So I believe it can be learned and taught, but that was an experience where I saw somebody who just had it naturally and it blew me away. I was privileged to be able to invest in her company, and I believe it's on an incredible path to success. So it can be done.
I see you have a copy of your book back there.
I keep it on the shelf.
Yeah.
Um,
Fever pitch. I love it. That's good.
exactly. There's a lot of music tied into the book. I tried to make it fun and give it a couple different layers. I think there is a crossover or a parallelism to music and entrepreneurship. Just like you need to sing in perfect pitch, if you're listening to a song and it's out of pitch or out of key, it just sounds terrible. There might be songs that you don't particularly love, but at least you understand that they're sung or played in the right key or tone. In the startup world, 82% of investors are telling us that the pitches they hear are on average not presented properly. That means that imagine you're like a judge in a singing contest and 82% of the people singing are singing off key. It's very frustrating for both sides. So I'm trying to teach people through this fun acronym and through this book how to sing their song in key. And there's a lot of music references in the book, which is why I called it Fever Pitch. I believe that there's a commonality between music and business presentation that people don't necessarily realize at first.
I think that's pretty neat how you intertwine that and connect the dots and make the connection there. That's really awesome. That's good stuff. Yeah. So it sounds like the book is not just a boring book, you know?
I sure hope not. You're meant to get pretty invested in this person and his relationships. Like he's got some problems that are coming up in his life, like his partner, his wife, his wife's cousin is very problematic. The mafia, of course, being chased by them and being threatened to be killed.
Yeah.
That can that can ruin your day. So it's meant to draw people into the story and then teach along the way. I really tried to write it where it could be fun for a founder and their spouse. Like
Yes.
beach read like the spouse picks it up on the shelf and says, "Oh, what's that?" and reads it over the summer. In fact, one of my endorsements from somebody I know who teaches entrepreneurship at Harvard Business School says, I don't know whether I should teach this book in my entrepreneurship class at Harvard Business School or read it at the beach. And the answer is both. It's meant to be a teaching tool that is being taught at Harvard, Johns Hopkins, and the Technion in Israel. Yet people are reading it on the beach and at the pool. It's meant to solve for both and to satisfy both kind of readers. And even if you're not that interested in startups or in business presentation, it should be a fun, captivating story because of the relationships and the trials and tribulations that these poor people are going through on their way through the story.
I
And
don't,
I'm even a little bit sympathetic to the mafia characters. I think a lot of books, a lot of stories are cartoonish, where the good guys are clearly good, the bad guys are clearly bad. I don't believe in that. I believe that everyone has flaws and positive traits. So I don't think there's anybody in this book who's clearly good or bad. The villains portrayed in the book, you kind of feel for them. Like they're trying, they're struggling. There's a parallel between the mafia characters and their entrepreneurial dreams and their hopes and aspirations for themselves, and this guy and his partners and their aspirations and dreams. It's meant to be like you're meant to feel a little bit for them. I think good character development is not black and white, and I've tried to do that in the book. Hopefully, that makes it more engaging and fun for the reader.
in the book, Mark undergoes a mindset shift. I love mindset and transformation. It's something that I'm just so drawn to. Why is internal change so critical and how can other entrepreneurs tap into that? I know you talked about heart, but can we talk about, I don't know if that's like a redundant question.
I think that is the question. I think as humans, we need to change every day. The entrepreneur mentality is a fun, amazing, and problematic mentality all at the same time. I consider myself an entrepreneur. I know how stubborn I am about what I believe in. I know how completely convinced I am about the things I believe in. But like I said in the beginning of the interview, it's very hard to break out of your body and remember that not everybody believes what you believe. Part of the mindset shift, he has to go through a number of mindset shifts in the story. It's about his relationship with his partner, it's about his relationship with his wife, it's about his relationship with other people around him. And that's one of the themes is that we have to grow as human beings all the time. This guy has other issues below the surface beyond presenting his startup properly. He's got to recalibrate a bunch of his attitudes that on the surface seem like they're black and white or bad or good, but he needs to have a more nuanced understanding of the people around him. And hopefully, I've been able to show through the story how he kind of makes that, but it's still not clear until the end what's going to happen to all the characters, and there are some twists. Clearly, I'm trying to teach not just business presentation skills, but also how to process mindset shifts
Which is
and
a
just be
life
aware.
skill. That's a life
Yeah,
skill right there.
yeah,
Yeah, I love it.
yeah. And there's some good denouement stuff at the end where he comes to grips with the journey that he's gone through in his mindset shifts, not just related to the presentation, but to the people around him. Whenever we're driven to do something, we sometimes forget about the people around us and what they're thinking. We have to keep in mind how to relate to those people too. And we may not be reading them properly because we're so focused on what we're doing that we sometimes lose track of what everybody else is doing or what they're thinking. So this book has some lessons about that too, as a sub theme, which I hope people enjoy and pick up on.
I know that self-doubt can sometimes get in the way. Being a perfectionist could even sabotage a pitch. What's your advice for overcoming that? Did you deal with self-sabotage or self-doubt in your career journey?
Absolutely. So many times, the writing of a novel, when you're a finance person, I'm a former lawyer. I never thought I'd ever be a writer. When the word got out in my family and among some of my business contacts and friends that I was working on a novel, there were a lot of funny looks and misunderstandings. If you do something creative, if you undertake to do something creative, unfortunately, we live in a cynical, sarcastic world sometimes, and people think that you're doing it for self-promotion. I really just wanted the story to be out in the world, and I realized the only way the story is going to be out in the world is if I write the darn thing. And I just started to write it. I wasn't convinced that I was going to publish it until I was finished and read it and felt that it was worthy of more editing and refining. But every single day that you're sitting at your computer or on a couch or outside writing, you're thinking, why in the world who am I to be doing this? I'm not a novelist. This is not what I set out to do. So I would say self-doubt plagued me throughout and still does. The creative act is about overcoming. I think Eric Fromm has this line where he says, creativity is the process of avoiding certainty. That was in my head every single day.
Wow.
The safe path would have been just to sit at my desk, do my job, look at startups, make investments, work with the companies, and not try to do something creative to teach anybody anything. But I really felt this burning passion to put this thing out into the world, to try to be helpful to people. And the only way that was going to happen was if I did the work to put it out into the world. So self-doubt is a huge issue, what they call like imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to be doing this? And I think people experience that when they go for job interviews, when you're trying to punch above your weight or do something new. I think some people don't care, but I think most of us are like me and we do care a lot. We're very self-conscious, we're very nervous, and I learned a lot about myself in this process of getting this thing out into the world. The first time I showed the manuscript to anybody, you sort of hold your breath and give it to them and say, "Let me know what you think," and they start to page through it, and it doesn't happen in 5 minutes, but I remember that first email or phone call I got from somebody saying, "Wait, you wrote this?" They were surprised that this is a real book. How did you know how to do that? When you get that first confirmation that you actually did something that was worthwhile,
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
very invigorating because until then you're just so nervous that why am I doing this? I don't belong here. And I think a lot of us encounter that in all parts of our daily lives. We have to be strong enough to push ourselves to break out of convention and do the unusual thing because you only live once, and why not try it? If you feel like you possibly could do it, take a shot and do it.
I love that. You guys just do it, do the dang on thing. So, if someone was listening for the first time to this podcast, or for our current listeners, what would be the very first thing you believe they should do after hearing this podcast?
I would say the specific teaching that I'm trying to do is if you are an entrepreneur, if you are trying to start an innovative new business idea and you need to present it to people, then follow the H.E.A.R.T framework. You're going to be happier for it. It's going to make you feel more in control, and it's probably going to have a better chance of landing with the people that you're trying to present it to. That's the narrow message. If you are the target audience for my work, here's the framework you should use. More broadly, my work is trying to teach empathy in communication. When you are trying to communicate something to anybody else, take yourself out of your frame and reframe it in terms of how the listener is going to hear it or needs to hear it. That's very old. We've heard that a million times, but we can't hear it enough. Unfortunately, no matter how many times we hear it, we don't always do it. I'm just another voice saying empathy is really important. It's important in life. It's important in communication. When you are trying to communicate something to somebody else, it's not about what you want to say. It's about what they need to hear and the way they need to hear it in order for you to get them to come closer to your side. And that could be in any kind of critical conversation, whether it's business or personal or family. And this book is just another manifestation of that principle of empathetic communication, getting out of your own way, getting over your self doubt. All those things are encapsulated in this narrow message, but I think they're more broadly applied as well.
Would you say that this book could help job seekers, creatives, or public speakers?
It could. I mean, the specific HEART framework is designed for people that are pitching innovative ideas, solving specific problems, or tackling new opportunities. Yeah, like a business idea. The concept of setting up why you're doing it before what you're doing. Going back to Simon Sinek, and if anybody has not watched that TED Talk, it's one of the most famous TED Talks ever, where he's drawing the golden circle on that old easel. It's so riveting. I watch it over and over again, like a couple times a year. It's so powerful. And he's basically describing everything: business, politics, any kind of movement that causes people to change their behavior has to start with why. Too many of us just dive into what or how, what we want the people to do, what we want to present to them, rather than why this matters and why they should pay attention to us. So, again, I think that part of this framework applies way beyond business. I've taken it and stylized it further into the entrepreneurial or startup kind of context. But the overall principle of start with why, start with what's at stake, what you believe in, why the current situation is no good. When the nickel drops for Mark in the book, it's because he realizes that he's made the same sort of argument. He finds himself explaining something to someone using a certain format, but it's not the way he's explaining his business to people. And he realizes, oh, wait, the way I just made this argument in my personal life, that's the way I need to structure my argument for my company. So, yeah, the way we explain things and the way we motivate people, like I said, goes all the way back to when we were cave people in the cave. That's the
Yes.
way we told stories. That's the way we got each other motivated. That applies to things beyond business as well.
Ben, I appreciate you hanging out with me today. I enjoyed our talk. Before we end our episode, I want to ask you two questions. The first one is, and this is not a trick question because I think you've been talking about this word throughout the podcast. What is one word to describe what makes a pitch unforgettable?
I think empathy would be the right one. That's what arches the whole thing. Getting out of your brain or body and putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. That's what this framework is meant to do. If I had to boil it down to one word, that would be the word.
I love it. And before we end our episode, what is it that you would want the listeners to take away? What do you want to leave them with?
Well, I think in my note at the end of the book, I quote Bob Dylan, which is a famous quote that he said that the highest purpose of art is to inspire. So I'm clearly trying to inspire people through this book. It's not just meant to be fun, it's meant to get them to be inspired to do something. And I think those things would be try to do new things. Writing the book for me was a very new thing. It was an out of body experience, and I'm so happy that I did it. It was a tremendous amount of work, but I'm so glad that I did it. I had a lot of hesitations before I started. I would encourage people to try new things that you are passionate about. Try to make sure that as passionate as you are about them, you're explaining them as clearly as possible to the people around you so that they get what you're doing. There can be a lot of friction when you feel passionate about something new if the people around you don't get why you're doing it. Absolutely do it, but understand that people won't necessarily understand why you're doing it, and you may need to put some effort into explaining to people around you why this thing is so important to you and why you're dedicating the time and effort into doing it. That's what Mark has to go through in the book. That's what I had to go through in writing the book. I think that's what we all have to go through when we passionately try to do something new that people around us might not understand.
What an awesome episode. I enjoyed talking with Ben Wiener, the author of Fever Pitch. You've got to go out and pick up this book. We're joined today by author and venture capitalist Ben Wiener. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, Ben.
Thank you, Shante. Thank you so much for giving me the time, and it was great to be here.
It was great having you on the show. I love the fact that we're going to walk away with heart and it's going to mean more to us than just our heartbeat. We have a new acronym. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for coming on Authentic Talks. I really do appreciate you helping us to understand what HEART is all about. It's nice to have insight and to understand that there are actually human people, you guys, that are behind making these decisions and what it is that they think. And to be able to have Ben come on to help us out with what it is that they are looking for, what he's looking for in that pitch is so awesome, you guys. Now, be sure to pick up the book Fever Pitch, and it's an awesome story where he shares about a character named Mark and what Mark goes through. That was such a value packed episode with Ben and a true insider when it comes to what makes or breaks a startup pitch. From his own experience raising capital to hearing pitches every day, Ben's perspective is both real and refreshing. If you're building something big or even just dreaming about it, his advice is a must hear. His book, Fever Pitch, is more than a business fable. It's a startup survival guide wrapped in a fast paced, witty story that shows you how to pitch with power and heart, you guys. That's HEART. You can grab your copy now. It's available wherever books are sold, Barnes& and Noble, Amazon, and if the episode inspired you, share it with a fellow dreamer, a founder who's ready to level up their pitch game. You guys, until next time, keep dreaming, keep building, and remember your story does matter. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm Shanta with Authentic Talks 2.0.